As I was preparing for this video, I realized that feet are kinda nice. Not in a weird way though, in a completely normal way. I also discovered that the 3DS eShop didn't really age that well. Going through articles and Reddit posts that totally didn't lead me down a rabbit hole that led me to people dressed up as rabbits that awakened something in me, I saw that most of the best 3DS eShop games have since been ported to Nintendo Switch, and any remaining exclusives all come up short from being truly must-haves. While this video still includes 3DS eShop games worth playing under the $5 price tag, you won't find a true masterpiece like a Kappa's Trail on DSiWare. Seriously, go buy a Kappa's Trail if you haven't, it's amazing. Anyways, despite me finding enough games I enjoyed to fill out a YouTube video, keep in mind that I may have been a little generous when it comes to some of the titles here. Because if the 3DS eShop overall is lacking quality exclusives, the under $5 category is even more barren. With all that cheeriness out of the way, let's get started. The first game I played on my journey through cheap 3DS eShop games was Alien on the Run. If you enjoy fun gameplay, quirky humor, and cute little alien butts that turn into rockets after ingesting too much chili, Alien on the Run is definitely for you. Despite the name, it's not an endless runner. You have complete control over the alien as it tries to escape, though the levels are typically fairly small. Still, Alien on the Run is fun. You try to reach the goal as quickly as possible using dash charges to destroy any tractor beams in your way. It can be a little annoying when you get a cutscene with every tractor beam destroyed, but the alien is always doing some funny weird pose to make up for it. You'll be destroying a lot of them because you're aiming for the best time, and blowing them up adds a few seconds. A perfect run likely won't happen on your first try, or your second, or your third, so if you're the kind of person who chases high scores, you'll be doing that a lot here. Thankfully, most levels are under a minute, and restarting is super easy, so you won't be spending hours on them. Alien on the Run is a great example of a game not having to do too much to be enjoyable. There's nothing overly special about it, it's just extremely smooth and well put together. The level designs are great despite being basic, the different zones each have unique quirks, and there's several different levels with varying difficulty. It is a bit short though, and the gameplay never really evolves beyond run and dive since there's no upgrades, but that's why it's under $5, and I think it's priced accordingly. There's not much else to say other than, if the footage you're seeing intrigues you, buy Alien on the Run while you still can. And if you're the kind of person who enjoys score attack games where beating the level is easy, but getting an S rank takes hours of dedication to the point where peeling off your own skin seems like a better alternative than taking one more run to try and shave off a millisecond from your time, you'll enjoy it even more than I did. It wouldn't be a Trust Your Pilot eShop video if it didn't include a puzzle game. So allow me to introduce Sumico, or some Eco, whatever. It's a great puzzle game, though it does require math. And while it may seem super simplistic, it hides a brain-bustingly clever game underneath. Using the numbers on the bottom screen, you have to create the target number. You do this by either adding or subtracting, but you have to do it in a continuous loop. So there's a lot of strategy involved. While the easy answer to get a 9 is to just combine a 7 and a 2, you get more points for creating longer streaks, so you'll fail to get 3 stars in the level by keeping it simple, dumbass. Instead, you need to go on a bit of a journey, examine the entire board, and figure out the maximum number of moves you can do to hit the target score without destroying your overall position. Once I figured out chaining, I breezed through the first few levels and began to worry Sumico would be too easy. Well, before long they introduced negative numbers. So now you have to subtract bigger numbers from smaller numbers, and did you know that subtracting a negative number adds the number? Who knew? Not only that, they throw multiple target numbers at you per section. Since the hexagons don't replenish until you finish a section, it is possible to get a mission failed screen regularly. Because of that, the strategy deepens even further. Now you have to think ahead and prep numbers in the right areas. Overall, it's a simple concept pulled off expertly. In addition to a lengthy campaign that is constantly mixing things up, there's an endless mode. Pretty self-explanatory. However, you can customize your experience and turn off things like multiplication, division, or whatever that weird two-shaped hat the X wears is. It's just a nice touch the developers added to make it more enjoyable for as many people as possible. There are some negatives with Sumico though. Get it? Negatives? Anyways, the game takes its sweet time tallying up your score after each block, breaking up your rhythm. And Sumico can feel overly simplistic at times, but if you're in the mood for a deceptively difficult math-based puzzle game that will really test you, this is it. I'd even go so far as to say it'll wrinkle your brain more than Brain Age. Although Boxboy has made its way to Nintendo Switch, the franchise got its start on 3DS with a trilogy of titles. I decided to start at the end and go with Bye Bye Boxboy, mainly because it's supposed to be the best and also because I didn't want to get sucked into buying the other games. Part of the reason why I never played a boxboy game before is the basic design. And hot diggity daffodil is the design basic. You play as the boxboy QB, who is distraught after failing as a streaming service, traversing through very minimal levels. There are obstacles in your way, so you have to painfully give birth to box children, which can be used to reach high ledges or cross deadly spikes. Things start off super simple in the first couple of levels, but then you're able to use your boxes as a sort of grappling hook, pulling yourself up to places. Now, I'm normally the kind of person who hates it when people say things like, oh, it gets really good 15 hours in, because it's like, why wouldn't the developers just start the game at 15 hours in, right? But Bye Bye Boxboy is painfully easy through the first 4 worlds, barely requiring any critical thinking. Not exactly what you want from a puzzle game. Finally though, in World 5 it all comes together. Rocket boxes are introduced, adding a much needed new dimension to the puzzle solving. Now QB can fly, and the puzzles require more critical thinking as you manipulate the boxes to shoot up into the air and hit multiple switches at once. From that point on, Bye Bye Boxboy really settled into a nice groove for me. I won't spoil any of the other interesting mechanics they change with each new world, I'll just say that they do things with boxes you'd never expect. While it never knocked my box off with its gameplay or challenged me too greatly, Boxboy does a great job of keeping up a good pace and never falling into a rut. Because the levels are so short and each world is different, they never overstay their welcome. There is a downside to this though. By far my favorite world was World 12, except it was all over in just 7 short levels. I wanted more! While World 12 isn't difficult by any means, it flows together so well and showed just how special Boxboy could have been. So, while Bye Bye Boxboy may not be the toughest or even most exciting puzzle game ever made, it's still fun. While I can't include it any higher than B tier, if you've ever been bi-curious about the franchise, give it a shot on 3DS while you still can. Personally, while I'm glad I played Bye Bye Boxboy, I won't be unboxing any other games in the franchise. If you do decide to put your fingers in this box, there's a lot of content though. In addition to the main campaign, there's challenge levels and even a few extras that unlock after the credits roll. This isn't something you'll clear in a single afternoon, that's for sure. It'll take a whole weekend, including Friday night and Monday morning. Not because you have no friends and want to feel something other than loneliness. Definitely not that. You're cool. Just don't tell people you're playing with your tiny box when they ask what you're doing. If you've watched my other DSiWare or 3DS eShop videos, you'll notice that some great games are missing. That's because I've tried to focus on exclusives as much as possible, saving any games that might be on Switch for future videos. I decided to make an exception for Quell Memento though. Not only is it cheaper on 3DS than Switch, but it also has many glowing reviews from critics as well as players, so I felt it was worth bending the rules a little. To get the negatives out of the way, Quell Memento is a game that doesn't take advantage of the 3DS whatsoever. There's no 3D effect, the touchscreen is useless, and I'd actually say the game is worse for being on 2 screens because they have a couple second delay when passing things from top to bottom. The good news is that you can buy Quell Memento on any of the various platforms it's available for and not have to worry about the 3DS version. I'd classify Quell Memento as a relaxed puzzle game. There's calming music playing at all times, and an old man is recounting his life throughout the lengthy campaign where he ends up killing his wife or something. I don't know, I wasn't really paying attention. And the way you complete puzzles is very straightforward. Literally all you have to do is roll a ball around a grid, collecting everything in the particular stage in as few moves as possible. There's variations along the way like multiple balls, instant kill hazards, lasers, and much more over the 100+ levels, but the core mechanics never change. Because of that relaxed nature, there is a chance you'll fall asleep playing it. There's no time limits, no rousing music, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. Unlike Boxboy, where it felt like I was doing the same 3 or 4 moves throughout, Quell Memento can go from a breezy level that takes 10 seconds to a 5-minute level where you just can't find the answer. By having the amount of moves it takes to win always present, I found myself never getting overly frustrated. The answer was there, I just had to take a step back and look at the setup. This is definitely the kind of puzzle game where you'll struggle for a bit, then the answer will be right between your toes, then you'll go, oh, and wonder how you didn't see it sooner. So while it may have easy pockets where you're winning in 6 or 7 moves, by the midpoint you'll find yourself in elaborate levels that require 20 or more moves. So that begs the question, is Quell Memento a puzzle game worth playing? Definitely. Should you get it on 3DS? Well, if it goes on sale for a really deep discount before March, sure. Otherwise, get it on whatever other platform you can find it for. Because I was a Nintendo kid, a lot of the great Sega games passed me by. When looking through the best games on 3DS eShop, almost all of the 3D classics from Sega were mentioned, including Gunstar Heroes. Obviously, I broke the rules a little here since Gunstar Heroes is $6 in the US, but it's for good reason. 1, because I personally bought it on sale for under $5. 2, because this is my video and you can't tell me what to do. And 3, if you pay for the expansion pack, you can get Gunstar Heroes for free on Switch. However, the Switch version is the original and not the enhanced 3DS one, so this gives you 2 different ways to experience a good game. Anyways, at first I enjoyed the action. A horde of enemies come at you and you blast them away with your guns. Nothing too special there, though it flows together beautifully. But then I started collecting upgrades. You can have 2 variations equipped at a time, meaning your gun can go from shooting lasers to shooting balls of doom. Then at regular intervals, a boss fight will be thrown at you. There's nothing more satisfying than blowing your load into a boss and watching its HP melt away. Even with as much fun as I was having, there were some issues. It's painfully difficult for starters. Unless you have a great loadout, you will see the continue screen a bunch. Plus, I wasn't a huge fan of the running and gunning style because it never felt like I had complete control over my character or where I was shooting. Unfortunately, after trying both movement styles, neither felt perfect. Remaining still and firing left me vulnerable, while running and gunning meant I was always running in the direction I shot. But there is a great addition in the 3DS version, Gunslinger mode. Instead of hoping to get the right combination of weapons through pickups, now you have full control over which type of gun you use. Even after discovering an absolutely broken combo which does all the work for you, I still struggle. The boss at the end of stage 2 is a literal beast who transforms multiple times. So while the hardship of shooting was removed, learning the enemy's patterns and dodging was still enough to keep me engaged. While Gunslinger mode does make the game easier in some points, the charm and strong design of Gunstar Heroes always shone through. While stage 3 was a bit of a letdown despite being on top of a plane, stage 4 has you rolling a die and traversing a game board of sorts, fighting your way to the end. It makes absolutely no sense, yet is super clever at the same time. While the level where you can't use your gun is utter bullcrap, all the others provide a different challenge, so you never know what's coming up next. And while I was worried that Gunstar Heroes only had 4 short levels, it does extend beyond that a little bit. It's still not the longest game in the world though, clocking in at around maybe 2 hours. Overall, 3D Gunstar Heroes is worth playing. It's just up to you if you want to play the upgraded version on 3DS or play the original on Switch. Okay, so this is going to be a really weird one. I'm actually recommending a game I've never played. Clearly a bit of explanation is needed, like when my ex-wife found me stuck inside the vacuum. Topango 2 isn't available in Canada, but the first one is. However, it's not perfect, and the sequel appears to fix many of the issues reviewers had with the first game. So using my gigantic brain, I figured that if the core concept is enjoyable, I'd suggest those in the US to buy Topango 2. Not only is it better, but it's actually cheaper. So that begs the question, is Topango actually fun? And the answer is yes, for the first half of the game. So you know how when you go into your brother's room and ask him to borrow a hustler, but it's an absolute pigsty and you worry about walking anywhere for fear of stepping on a Lego piece, yet he can find whatever it is you're looking for in 2 seconds flat? That's called organized chaos, and it would be an apt description for Topango. Sort of like P-Cross, except not really. You extend the blocks out the number of spaces written on the corresponding block. So a block with a 3 on it needs to go 3 spaces. However, if there's nothing in its way after those 3 spaces, it will just keep going. So like P-Cross or Sudoku, you have to look at the entire puzzle and plot out your moves carefully, all while revealing the image on the top screen. It's a fresh take on a puzzle game that I don't think I've ever experienced, though it does feel familiar enough to not be overwhelming. In fact, I blasted through the first set of levels like they were a hustler. I think the main problem is that it's so difficult to keep track of your moves. If you make your way through a puzzle that takes a few minutes, you'll potentially come to a roadblock near the end. A block will be left over and you have to figure out the solution. Problem is, you just sort of have to randomly tap completed blocks to reset them, but that causes a chain reaction invalidating other blocks. So fixing a mistake takes about 3 times as long, because you have to fix the new mistakes that came as a result of you attempting to fix the original mistake. So remember when I said Topango is fun for the first half of the game? That's because the further you progress, the larger the puzzles become. And once those puzzles reach a certain size, they become unplayable. Due to the lack of a zoom option, it's impossible to actually read the numbers on the blocks and even more difficult to slide the correct block. Ultimately, the first version shows promise, but it was still a letdown. To that end, I read reviews for the sequel. According to them, a zoom feature is added, fixing one of the major frustrations with the original. Plus, it apparently becomes easier to tell where blocks originally come from should you need to make a correction. And Nintendo Life pointed towards more calming music, as opposed to the original's choice of having a rabies-infested raccoon run through a cymbal shop. While I enjoyed the concept of Topango, it does have some obvious flaws. The fact that an improved sequel exists means you should never think about buying the original. That is, of course, assuming you live in a region that actually has the sequel. If not, and you really like the gameplay on screen, just fall asleep to some Topango 2 gameplay on YouTube and hope your brain allows you to dream of it. Sort of like how I watch the Pokemon anime at night in hopes of dreaming about being Togepi. Not for the reason you're thinking. Unless you're thinking it has to do with Misty, then it is that. I can easily count on one foot the amount of times I've played a Phoenix Wright game. It's just one little piggy. My memory isn't quite what it used to be, but I think I tried the original Phoenix Wright for a few minutes way back when I was in diapers. Adult diapers. You don't want to know why or how much I was paid for doing that, trust me. Anyways, I don't recall enjoying it too much. I think I was just disappointed by the early DS lineup overall and never really got into games like Phoenix Wright or Trauma Center, but I'm here to rectify that by playing Dual Destinies. Now, I know what you're thinking. If Dudu Mbatha Raw married Lady Gaga, would she change her name to Dudu Gaga? And you're right, this is a $30 game regularly, but I make the rules here. And just like any person in charge of making rules, they only apply when I decide they do. Also, Capcom is probably the most notorious 3DS publisher when it comes to putting their games on sale through the eShop. Over the last few months, it's been on sale for $5 more times than I can count on my right foot. Hell, it's probably on sale right now as you're watching this video. As for the game, it starts off with the bomb detonating in a courtroom, then you quickly have to defend a falsely accused woman. For the most part, it plays out like a visual novel. A visual novel featuring the world's most annoying text scroll noise that can't be turned off. Thankfully, you can speed up the text, but it might result in skipping a key piece of dialogue, forcing you to check the text logs. Then, every once in a while, you'll have to examine witness testimony for inconsistencies, or pay attention to a witness's emotions to dig a little deeper. It's kinda crazy just how little gameplay there is in that first episode. I played Phoenix Wright for a few hours to complete episode 1, and in that time I'd say 95% of it was me reading and the rest was actually playing the video game. You basically just tap B a few hundred times, then wait for the game to give you witness testimony, and you essentially pick from one of 5 options. It's not exactly a puzzle game though, it's more about reading comprehension than anything else. I'm not quite sure what I was expecting from the gameplay in Dual Destinies, but I was expecting something. There's literally nothing to do for obscenely long stretches of time. For example, I recorded 20 minutes of footage for this video. In those 20 minutes, I didn't do anything that would qualify as gameplay. No examining crime scenes, no interviewing witnesses and trying to outsmart them, nothing. I just tapped B while people talked. Finally, after 25 minutes of doing nothing, I was finally able to examine a crime scene. It was fairly bare bones though. I moved the cursor over a place I was allowed to examine, then the characters talked. It's not as though I zoomed in on every object, then had to rotate them looking for a fingerprint or a weird white sticky substance. I just moved around the room, waited until the game said I could click on something, then I clicked on it. After episode 1, you go back in time for episode 2, which sees you switching from Phoenix Wright to Apollo Justice, hence the Dual Destinies part of the title. Things play out slightly differently here. Instead of beginning in the courtroom, you head to that crime scene first. While episode 2 is much better than episode 1, it still suffers from the same problems. Once you get back into the courtroom, there's several instances where people just scream "objection" back and forth at each other and slam the desks while I did absolutely nothing. There's also times where instead of having a right answer, you're just supposed to toss out the right guess based on almost nothing, but that will see you progressing the case. Even with all my objections, I can see why Phoenix Wright has been such a successful franchise. When the game gets rolling and you're in court, examining evidence and trying to find inconsistencies, it can be quite fun. I enjoyed sifting my way through statements and having to go back and figure out the true answer, but the game makes it so stiff. Even if you know the answer, you have to go through a predetermined path. It's not like a detailed dialogue tree where each line of questioning leads down a new path, changing the story in the course of the case. It's more like a circle where you learn new things by pressing the witness, but you ultimately circle back to the original problem at foot. So as soon as I'd start gathering momentum, the game would do its damnedest to throw in another person lying or misremembering something, or chuck in an objection back and forth like we're playing tennis. Because the gameplay is lacking, Dual Destinies ultimately comes down to one thing: the writing. From a story standpoint, I can't say it's anything special. I fingered the true culprit of episode 1 the moment I met them. It's not like they were a cunning linguist and I was a master debater and we had a battle of wits. They were clearly the perpetrator, I just had to wade through long-winded text change and point to places on a picture to advance the story. The same thing happened in episode 2. I knew who the murderer was before the trial even began, but it was about digging through evidence and listening to people ramble on and deal with amnesia. I ultimately ended my time with Dual Destinies when episode 2 concluded. The full experience is 25 hours long, and I'm saying you should buy it, so continuing to play felt unnecessary. However, if you don't like a lot of reading and a lot of posturing and a third thing I can't remember but probably will when someone shows me a piece of evidence to jog my memory, Phoenix Wright can be enjoyable, it's just not completely for me. My closing argument is this. Overall, I was disappointed by Dual Destinies and have no interest in continuing the Phoenix Wright franchise. Between the endless talking, surprising number of spelling mistakes, same 3 reused animations, and lack of gameplay, I'd probably place it in C tier. However, Dual Destinies is one of the highest rated games in the series by players. So if you've ever been interested in the Phoenix Wright franchise, you can get Dual Destinies for under $5 when it's on sale. Therefore, thanks to double technicalities, even if I personally didn't love the game, it still deserves to be in the video. That's right, you've all been lawyered. Legally, you have to send me $5. Fine, I'll settle for you watching another one of my videos. I think what I learned while making this video is that there isn't a true must-have game on the 3DS eShop under $5. There's definitely some fun games to play, I just wish I could tell you to drop everything and buy this one game before it's gone. Instead, I'm left offering up recommendations of games that each have their positives but are lacking in other areas. Sumico is probably the best game I played in this video, but that's because I'm addicted to puzzle games.